Instagram's playing some games. Let's see if it's playing some games after this. I know a few tricks. What up, y'all? We just getting the ball rolling. A little technical difficulties. But nothing's gonna hold us down. Here we go. But I encourage you to come on in. I encourage you to invite a friend. Actually, I encourage you to invite about 10 of them friends and tell them to come on in, because we about to go in. It's Floating Yogi's Book Club, y'all. Alright.
I'm not seeing any IGs yet.
Yeah, it's not working. We have a little technical difficulty with that. I'm not sure as to why, but I'm gonna try one more thing. And after that, I'm just gonna move forward. Yeah, I don't think it's connecting. Connected. Refresh. Stop. The last thing I'm gonna try. Here it is. Now that I'm here. Modify. That did nothing. Start. Alright. It had, oh, there we go. It actually worked. Okay. Come on. Jarrick with the tech stuff. Let's go. Floating Yogi on the go though. Uh-oh, you know. Go live. Alright. See, it just takes a little bit of patience sometimes. Some helpful hands. And lastly, peace and love, kings, queens, and gods. I am the Floating Yogi, and this is Floating Yogi's Book Club, brought to you by Yogi, Urban Yogic Wellness and Education, where we are restructuring health and wellness in the community, one healthy habit at a time. I highly encourage you to tap into the Yogi website, where you can sign up to become part of the growth gang, get notifications about what we're doing, and access to all of the services that we have. Welcome. Come on in, yo. Invite a friend. Invite about 10 of them friends, because we about to begin in a little bit. We're reading a new book here in Book Club. I'm excited about it. I like it. I got a little bit more than halfway through, and I was like, this is going to bring up a whole bunch of conversational topics. Hey, what up, Megan? Welcome. It's going to bring up a whole bunch of conversational topics on the concepts in yoga, how they correlate to health and well-being, and some of the back and forth that typically happens within the teaching process of like learning these new skills and learning how to think a little bit differently. That can be a little bit tricky, because what is there to trust? And that's why there's having a good guide and it goes through all of this fun stuff. So with that being said, check out the website, sign up so we can go back and forth, be part of the Discord, part of the community. And also, I encourage you to check out Lifeform when you do get your practice started, when you're ready to take it. You're like, you know what, I'm ready. I got the sunstyles. I feel confident with this. I'm ready. Let me get my mat. You can check out the Lifeform mats. They got some saucy mats where you can actually put in the work. It's slip resistant, dope designs, ways to connect, and feel grounded and stable on the mat, and bring that into our day-to-day life. I encourage you to check them out. And what else we got? Also, some of the other people who help me do what I do. We got my dude DJ Tony. He's part of the crew from Yoga Universe. Here at UE, we are a collective, and DJ Tony from a whole new universe, like I mentioned, where people are our greatest resource, and that's exactly what he is. And I highly encourage you to tap into him to figure out exactly how he could be a great resource to you. And with here at UE, he manages the daily accountability group, group in UE stories, where you can meditate, vote, and share, and that'll get you an entry into the growth gang, letting people know that, hey, I am out here caring and taking actionable steps towards my health and well-being. And he be on here vibing with us, yo, helping me get some content and get some saucy stuff for us. So I encourage you to check them out. And what else we got? There's some more. I'm gonna randomly, shamelessly plug them in throughout. Welcome. Come on through, y'all. Come on through. Let me go invite some folk. We about to get started. I'm about to invite 10. You invite a friend as well. And we about to read How Yoga Works. This is the second storybook that we have actually started reading. The first was The Alchemist. I think that was the only one we read, actually. Yeah, that was the only storybook we read. So now we're gonna get started in this one. And like I mentioned earlier on, it's gonna give us a great reference on how the yoga process works, how you can integrate these ways of thinking and ways of being into your daily life to create a better state of well-being. And it talks about some of the back and forth that happens between teacher and student, and grasping these new concepts and actually integrating them. So, with that being said, we about to get the ball rolling after I get some water. Tony back. Can you tell them a little bit about Yoga Universe, a little bit about what you do on the UE stories?
So, if you already doom scrolling on IG like you probably are, head on over to UYWE.DC on IG. Check out the story. It asks you a simple question. Have you moved a metric taker today, or are you bullshitting on your greatness? Click the poll, get a shout out the next day. Join the growth gang. Real simple.
It's that simple. That was crisp, clean. Daggone it. I love it. Let's just jump into it. This is a long book. Well, this is somewhat. It's a good one. Alright. The place we all start from. Third week in February. Iron Snake Year. 1101 AD. It was just another one of those dusty little Indian towns. No sign before. No way to even know what they call it. The roads just start to get wider and you see more people on it. And then suddenly the wild green of the jungle ends and you spot the first little houses of brown mud brick. And then you're in a little stream of farmers and women carrying water in clay jugs on their head, and cows and pigs and chickens all headed for the middle of town. We came to a stout wood pole stretched across the road, about waist high. There was a little guardhouse set up on the side with a bored policeman leaning out a small window in the heat of the sun and the dust of the road. Long Life and I had seen dozens of little checkpoints like this in the past year. The police were supposed to catch people poaching wood or animals from the jungle, which was the property of whatever local tyrant called himself king. Mostly, though, the police simply took the opportunity to force bribes out of traveling merchants. Long Life? What is this Long Life? Who is this Long Life?
The Yui is cutting you off at your shoulder. The IG live on Yui. Okay.
Thank you. Maybe that does a little bit better.
I'll let you know.
Delay. People and animals just came up to the pole and ducked under and went on. And so Long Life and I did too. It was easier for Long Life, you see. He's a little Tibetan mustache dog and about as high as your ankles. As we went under, the policeman stepped out. They leaned over lazily and picked up a stone and threw it at Long Life, who was used to this greeting in India, and dodged it easily. But I was tired and hot and threw an insolent glance at the man and collected Long Life in my arms. "You!" he called. I walked on without a pause. Something my grandfather taught me. You could always say you hadn't heard. That's real life. "You there, stop!" And then it sounded like a lahi tapped on the ground. A lahi is a strong, flexible, wicked wooden stick. If you put one on the end of the ground, it comes up to about your waist, and all the policemen carry one. It doesn't look like much, but at the right hands, it can blade your skin open in a minute. And some of these men I knew were really looking for an excuse to use it. So I stopped. Sounds like a good decision. "Welcome, y'all. Welcome. Come back here." I turned and looked at his face, dark with hours in the sun and dark with the evil temper and something else. I walked back slowly, trying to look calm. "Into the guardhouse." "Into the guardhouse," he ordered, pointing with his stick. It was hardly big enough for a single person, let alone the two of us. But better not fight. The fingers around the stick were tense. Just go on and listen. He pushed in after me too close, and then he pushed in after me too close, and then I knew what it was about him. He had that sweat stench of a man who drank too much of the local sugarcane liquor. He leered at me with his bloodshot eyes up and down with the simple pink-hued orange of the light cotton sari dress I traded from a warm mountain woolens nearly a year ago. "You're not from around here," he said, almost accusing me. No, sir, I'm not." "Then where are you from?" "From Tibet," I said. He looked at me blankly. "The snowy mountains," I added, pointing vaguely off to the north. He nodded, but his eyes were already down, crudely across my chest. Then to Long Life, and then to the red woolen bag. "What's in the bag?" he said. Again, the policeman's accusation. I heard it 100 times, the preliminary to a dilemma for a bribe. I was in no mood. "Nothing of value," I replied, trying to inch a little further back from his body and the stench. "Open it," he ordered, pointing to the little shelf at the window near our elbows. I gave him one hard glance and silently set my things out on the shelf. All the things in the world, a shawl from Katrine, a small wooden bowl, and a book wrapped against the weather. "Open it," he demanded, pointing to the book. I opened the wrapping. He leaned over the ancient pages as if to read them. They were upside down. "It is old," he declared, standing straight again, glaring into my eyes. "It is," I said simply. Where'd you get it? My teacher gave it to me, I replied. He looked in my face again. Your teacher, he said in disbelief. My teacher, I repeated. Put it back, he said, waving the book and my things. I collected them slowly, trying not to let him see my hands were shaking. I looked past him out the door. Then, may I go, sir? He took the bag from my hands. You will come with me. And he turned and walked down the road to the town. I followed behind, my heart pounding and long life pressed to my chest. In about half an hour, the man turned off the road into a dusty little yard. At the back, there was a dirty, shabby building of the same dull brown mud brick. It had a porch with a thatched palm cupboard, fallen under one side, thick with the hot, dry dirt of the yard. At the very top of the building, stretched across the mud, was the face of a lion with two swords crossed below it, sign of the local king. I thought to myself, they were all pretty much the same. At least he hadn't taken me home. Maybe I could talk to someone higher up, maybe someone who wasn't drunk. The dark man stepped to the side and pointed to the door with a stick. Inside, he grunted. I held up my skirt and stepped across the dirt pile on the porch, and then through a small door. Sit down, he said. He's very articulate. Sit down, he said, pointing to a little wooden bench against the wall. He turned into a doorway opposite the bench, and I could hear him talking to someone in low tones. I surveyed the little police station, the jail. For now, I could see what it was. I sat in a largish room. The back was divided into 3 crude cells of the same mud brick. The front of each cell was open to the view, with stout bamboo bars from ceiling to floor, and a little door of the same material. 2 cells were empty, but in one to the right was a figure lying face down on the bare floor. The wall across me had a rack of old rusty swords and spears locked across with a bar, the real weapons for major trouble, something this town had probably never seen. And then 2 small rooms behind where I was sitting. So we got 2 jail cells, or 3 jail cells, 2 rooms, and some weapons. Okay, where I was sitting, my eyes returned to the floor in the same piles of dirt. The policeman came back out. Come, he ordered again, pointing to the door behind him. I entered with an uneasy feeling, clenching long life tightly. Sit down, he said again, pointing this time to the grass mat on the floor. The captain wants to talk to you. Wait. And he was gone, and the door was closed. Welcome, y'all. Welcome. I sat and looked at the cat. If y'all want to be part of the discussion, I highly encourage you to check out Yogi.dc website. You can sign up to be part of the Growth Gang, create an account. All the services will be available for you, and you can be live in live action, live time with us to be chit-chatting and talking about it. So, Tony, this is a little, like I said in the beginning, this is a little jacked up story. but we get
crooked cops.
Yeah, crooked cops, corrupt government, not much different from here in America. A little different. We don't have mud jail cells, and there's a little bit more to the lock you up process to this. Technically, she's not.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. And technically, she's not locked up yet. She's just talking to the captain.
I doubt she's free to leave.
Yeah.
We don't know how that feels.
Right. Alright. Hey, Jamie in this thing. What up, though? friend. Yeah, what's good? Alright, let's get it. Da 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 da. I sat down, looked at the captain. He was seated on a thicker mat and cushions at the head of the room, bent over a low table covered with papers, seeming to be quite occupied writing something out with a bamboo pen. But I knew this bureaucrat's trick too by now. He would let me wait until he was sure I was uncomfortable, before he even acknowledged that I was there. It was a way of saying that I was beneath his notice. And so I took time to study the room, and the captain too. He was surrounded in disorder, stacks of ledgers and papers, everything covered with the same brown dust. The only light was from a small window across from the door, but the afternoon sun laid across it as he worked. I guess he was about 35, the career public servant type, settled into his middle age. I think at one time he must have been handsome. He had thick black hair coming out of his little curls, but peppered by now with gray. Too early gray, I thought. When he looked to the side and checked some lists of things, I can see him flinch tightly. With that and his stooped shoulders, I could guess that he had hurt his back from years of sitting like this in the office, hunched over his reports. His face had been strong, I think, most noble, but now it was marred with lines of pain cutting down between the eyebrows and crossing the corners of his mouth. His cheeks had gone a little puffy and there were bags under his eyes. Probably having trouble sleeping with the pain in his back, and some other pain too. Something in his heart, I thought. And then, not to seem too forward, I lowered my eyes again and waited, as a woman in those times was expected to. Finally, he set his pen down, covered his ink blot, and raised his eyes to me with the steadiness of authority. I don't know if that's authority. I don't think I do that too well. But, anarchy! The sergeant says I should waste my time questioning a girl with a book. He sighed. I looked up and gazed into his face. It was not an unkind face, but it was the face of someone in pain. And so I thought I better be quiet. There's a pause. And in that one moment, I felt him ready to send me on my way. I looked to the door, and he seemed to hesitate. But then, I looked back, and he was studying my face, as if I were someone he might have known. Then, he looked down for a moment, and set his hands on the little writing desk. Come here, closer. Show me the book. I moved up across from him, took the book from my bag and set it on the desk. I went to open it, but his hands were already there, strong, handsome hands, and he unwrapped it with a quick gesture. He knew about books. The sergeant was right. He nodded. This is old, the old kind. Letters scratched into palm leaf. I nodded. My heart sank. How did you get this book? He said, looking stern into my face. My teacher gave it to me. Teacher? What kind of a teacher? The one, sir. And now I knew it could be trouble, but... the one, sir. And now I knew it could be trouble, but as always, I knew it was better to be honest. The one who taught me. The one who taught it to me. Who taught it to you? Yes, sir. To you. To a girl. How old are you? 17, sir. And you have studied this book. I have. I replied, raising my head with some pride as my grandmother would have. Where? In my own country. in Tibet. And that's where your teacher is. Yes, sir. Or what? Where my teacher was. He is dead. My teacher is. How could he ever understand? My teacher is gone. Gone. He was staring at me now, alert, sensing the hesitation. Yes, sir, I said, settling back, starting to worry now. And why then have you come to India? I am traveling to the Ganges River to Varanasi to study further there. Study? A girl? Study with whom? With the teacher there, I replied lamely. What teacher? What is his name? I don't know. Don't know? How will you find him? Or her? I thought, but all I could do was shake my head. He was searching my face again. How long have you been traveling? I looked up at the ceiling and counted the months. A year, sir. Almost exactly a year. And what does your husband think of this? I have no husband, sir. Your father, then? My father knows I have come to India. Knows, but not approve, he retorted, and all I could do was look at the floor. The captain sighed again and ran his fingers along the title of the book. I could see his lips moving, working out the sounds of the Sanskrit, the mother tongue written there. And so, he can read it. I thought, but only barely. Only just the sounds. It's the Yoga Sutras, he said softly. The great mother of all teachings on yoga. I nodded. And you know it? Do you know it well? I nodded again. He straightened up suddenly in his seat, and I saw him wince again. He straightened up suddenly in his seat, and I saw him wince again. So used to it that he wasn't even aware that he was wincing. Imagine how it all sounds to me, he said. A girl, your age, claiming to know a book like this, a priceless book, learned from a missing teacher, and wandering around a foreign country alone with no husband, without her father's permission, headed for a teacher with no name. And if the sergeant is to believe, without a penny in her possession. I nodded. This was the sum of my life. And so you swear this book is your own. You have not stolen it. It is mine. He sighed again, heavily, and then suddenly turned the book around towards me. He flipped through several palm leaf pages and pulled them off and stabbed his finger on the page. Here then, read what it says here. I leaned over the desk. It was from the second chapter. I began. It says, things that cannot last seem to us as if they will. 2-5A. The captain's eyes suddenly dropped. Now, this is what I like about the book, because it's starting to drop in some of the Yoga Sutras. That is this book. And it's got like all the writing from the, which text did this come from? I'm gonna jack it up, but at this moment, but one of those ancient texts that it came from. It's in here somewhere. Translations from Patanjali, and he was reading like the anyway, here nor there. We'll find that later. Now we're talking about this girl who's about to get locked up because they damn sure don't believe that she was given this book, and she'll be where she at. But she in flow. She right where she need to be. Who knows? The captain's eyes suddenly dropped and stayed there a moment. When he looked up, they were glistening, as though they were about to cry. And there was anger, or perhaps an anguish in his voice. What does that mean? He demanded. It is talking about our lives, I replied quietly. Our friends, our family, our work, our own bodies. When they are there in front of us, when we can see them and touch them, it seems as though they will always be there. But then, they always leave us. His face tightened. That is not what it says. It is, most certainly, exactly what it says, sir. You are lying. You're just making something up. You're trying to get away with this thing you've stolen. But that's not what the book says. This is a book about yoga, the greatest book of yoga. And yoga is, well, exercise, things you do, special exercises to get healthy, to fix problems like with your body. And he leaned towards me intensely, and it made him wince, again, unaware of it still. That is what it says, I replied. The captain glared at me and closed the book. I reached out to wrap it, but his hand comes down on the pages hard. I will keep this, he said flatly. But I need it. Maybe so, but no matter. You are staying too. My mouth fell open, and tears of rage and fear welled up, despite myself. The captain stood up with some difficulty, staring down at me. We will see if anyone reports this book stolen. It may take some days. During that time, you have a chance to prove that this book is really yours. But how? I cried. Easily, he smiled, but with a shadow of tension. I have a problem, you see. I have hurt my back. It has hurt for a long time. And yoga, I know would fix it. And so it is easy, you see. You will show me how to fix my back, and if you succeed, then I will know that you know yoga, and I can believe that this book is yours. Understood? He said finitely. But, I said, Sergeant. He called to the door. Come, lock her up. Dun, dun, dun. That's chapter 1. Well-being that stays. Chapter 2. That's jacked up. But now we have the plot.
Sounds like a movie.
Right? It does, don't it? It sounds like a whole movie. Might be something, might be on to something, my guy. Might be on to something, my guy. Alright. Anything you wanted to recap on or that stood out to you about the jump?
Nah, we good for now. We just settling in.
That. One more to run back the year, the time where we at. It is the 3rd week of February, Iron Snake year 1101 AD. Now, we're in the 4th week of February. So, she's been there a week. 4th week of February. Well-being that stays. The sergeant led me roughly by the arm to the middle cell, pushed me inside, and barred the door. A moment later, he was back with a stout piece of rope, tied around the dog's neck. He stays with me, I said, trying to muster grandmother's tone of authority, but failing. No dogs in the jail, he answered simply. I stood without moving and glared at him, and then simply cried. It worked. A bit. I'm going to tie him up outside, said the sergeant, trying to sound gruff. You will be able to see him out the window. He pointed his stick to the back wall to a small window with bars. And food and water? I asked. He looked at me with a dark amusement. Same as you, he said simply. He tapped the stick impatiently on the floor, and I realized I was lucky he wasn't going to kill Long Life. I stopped and tied the rope and told my little line to go along with it. This was not the time to be removing chunks of flesh from people's legs. He was calm and seemed to understand. We had been through a lot together, and this was just one more thing to bear for a larger goal. And so he went. I could see him then out the window, and the dust settled. We discovered a little hole down the bottom of the wall. I could reach out and touch Long Life's nose if we both stretched, but the bricks there were all covered with filth. I stood up tall at the window and peeked down and saw a little trench dug out the back of the cell, ending in a stagnant pool of stench at the edge of the building. Then I realized that little hole was to be my toilet. And I turned and looked back out the front of the cell. The sergeant was still there, sitting on the bench, his eyes glued on me mercilessly. With the kind of hunger, the kind he might show for a jar of liquor. Or suddenly I saw that this would be the most terrible part of the jail, to be on display, to be stared at all day, all night, by anyone who wished to stare, whether I was awake or sleeping or even going to the bathroom. At first I determined that they should never see anything. But then I sat and thought about what my teacher would have done, what Katrine would have done. The words of the master, the words of Patanjali, who 1,000 years before had written a little book on the captain's desk, came to mind in the teacher's voice. And they realized Sutra 339b, and they realized that the body itself is a prison. In a way, I thought that we're all in prison. A prison from which only death can release us. And these other prisons, well, then they're just a point of view. I had a wonderful chance here to make myself stronger, and perhaps others, and the other people here, including the sergeant, each in the jail of their own. And so I simply laid down on some straw, piled in a corner, and took my rest. I mean, that's real. What you gonna do? That's acceptance right there. You know the situation, you see it, you see your hesitation and resistance to it, what your fight is, and then it's like, alright, regardless of what I want, I'm here. Let me just reset real quick. Let me reset, get up, and see what's up. Let me check out in the morning. I woke at the usual time, before dawn, and went through all my regular morning practices. I had learned a long time before that keeping them up every day was more important than the problems that would always arise and try to stop them. I'm going to say that again, because that is facts. I had learned a long time before that keeping them up every day was more important than the problems that would always arise and try to stop them. Those distractions, don't be distracted. Thankfully, the jail was dark, and the only sound was the gentle snoring of the man on the floor in the next cell. At least he wasn't dead. Afterwards, I sat and thought for a while, because it was just a body image the first time. Okay, I sat and thought for a while. I thought about the captain. I thought about his back. I could think of all of this and something terrible as something that I could think of all this as something terrible, as something that could even cost Long Life and myself our lives. Or I could try to see if perhaps something bigger was happening. Perspective. I began to think of the captain. I began to think of the best and the fastest way I could help the captain cure his bad back. And it occurred to me that events had thrust me into the very place that I always said I wanted to go. An opportunity where I could help others heal themselves with the knowledge of yoga, the knowledge of the master's little book. And then I caught myself thinking like the teacher, appreciating for the very first time what it must have been like to stand on the other side, looking at a student like myself. It dawned on me suddenly that the job of teaching me, so full of pride and stubbornness, had surely been more difficult than fixing a tired office worker's bad back. And so I began to make my plans. Dun dun dun, she gave me now. The sun was well up by the time anything stirred in the jail. First, a tall younger man came through the front door and then simply turned around, leaned against the door frame, and stood there, staring out at the people passing the road. About 10 minutes later, the captain came up the path and onto the porch. The younger man straightened up sharply, saluted, stepped to the side respectfully as the superior entered. The captain waved at my cell, "Bring the prisoner to my room." The younger man turned and, with a look of surprise, saw me for the first time. He came and collected me quietly, took me to the captain, and then left and closed the door. "We will begin now," the captain commanded. I nodded. "Please, come and stand here," I said, pointing to the middle of the room. He came and stood, and I looked over him silently, as my teacher had me that first day. And then I knew what Katrine had been looking at, because the very way the captain stood there and told me everything about his life, his tummy and chin and skin were loose, with that of a person who works at a desk all day. His shoulders were bent in, and his neck looked frozen in place from years of tension, trying to please his own superiors, whoever they were. And the pain in the back was the pain of his life and the pain in his back and the pain of his life were making his once gentle features hard and lined. I could see the layers of them, body sagging, the locking up, the joints inside stiffening, the inner wings choked at the joints. That's some yoga stuff right there. His thoughts strangled the inner wings. The troubles of his life disturbed his thoughts, and the very source of all the events of his life at the very middle of it, each one caused by the other, and nothing he could stop by himself, because he didn't even know it was happening. But where to start with him? Where would my teacher start with him? I heard Katrine's voice again, and I spoke the words of the master out loud to the captain, to my very first pupil. "The poses bring a feeling of well-being, which stays with you." "The poses? You mean the exercise?" he said. "Now that sounds more like yoga." I smiled. "It is where we will begin, at least. Now stand as straight as you can." I spent an hour just getting him to stand in his body the way he was meant to stand in his body, the way he stood in it before his habits bent and twisted his frame. And then, so he wouldn't think I didn't know anything more, I took him through what we called bowing to the sun salutation, which left him puffing within a few minutes. At the end, he looked accomplished. He had the look of accomplishment, the same look I must have had on my first day. I realized and I knew he deserved it. It takes so much courage just to start, I thought. "Now, I want you to do this much every morning for the next week," I said. "It's just 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will go from there. These poses will fix your back, just like the book says." I nodded pointedly to the book, still in the center of the desk. "It will cure your back, and it will cure you for good." The captain nodded happily and sent me back to my cell. That's so disheartening. I'm doing something for you, and then you're going to send me back to a cell. Alright. But fair enough. I guess where else would she stay to be doing this work? You could at least give me some food, though. you're keeping me here. I'd be feeding myself otherwise. Is that fair? Okay. Around noon on that first day, a small boy appeared in the doorway of the jail. He was thin and barefoot, dressed only in a ragged pair of shorts. In his hands, he held a tray covered with a cloth. He went to one of the rooms on the side and then came back out with the younger policeman. They went to the cell next to mine, and I could hear the door there open. And then the boy left. The smell of fresh rice and handmade bread wafted towards me, and I realized long life and I hadn't eaten for a day or two. We were used to this on the road eating, only when we found some fruits in the trees or a stranger who was willing to share some scraps of a meal. But the smell was overwhelming. I waited for my own meal to come and suddenly realized there might be no meal. And just as suddenly, a hand reached around the other cell and pushed a small cup of rice and beans in, between the bars. "Eat," a voice whispered from the other side of the wall. "Fast." Then push the cup back. "And for heaven's sake, don't let the sergeant see." I gulped the food down, setting aside a good part to hand through to long life, and got the cup back just before the sergeant's shadow loomed in the front of the room. So she got some food. But the jail could have at least gave her some food. Damn it, you kept me there. Let's see, where we at? We got 5 pages. Where we at? What up, though? Welcome, y'all. Y'all coming at the end of it, though. So, that's when we gonna close. Chapter 3. That was about it. She in there. She got started. We getting the ball rolling. Do I want to do this one more? Alright, I do want to do this one more. I'm gonna try to cook. I'm gonna try to just burn through the junk real quick. Welcome. Alright. A reason not to skip. The first week in March. She been there a fortnight, yo. Locked up for a fortnight. What do you mean? Well, I am where I am. For a reason. It always surprises me how fast we get used to something. The days pass and I made good use of them, settling down into a routine of yoga and silent mental review of the lessons that Katrina had taught me. And so it was as if I'd gone on a retreat, which I suppose I had. Life in the dirty jail, life in the dirty little jail outside was dull. Only on occasional, a farmer would come in to report a stolen cow, things like that. The cups from the other side of the wall came silently, every day, always right after one of the young boys delivered a fresh tray next door. It was just barely enough for Long Life and I, and the younger policeman left me a small jug of water each morning. I handed palmfuls out through the filthy hole into Long Life, who was panting from the heat, tied to a barren tree. Long before, I had cut his luxurious long hair so he could travel better in the Indian sun, but he was suffering. The next class with the captain was exactly a week from the first. He had brought me into his office, and I asked him to repeat what he had learned. After a minute or two, I could see that he had missed 3 or maybe even 4 days of practice. I stopped him. "You've been skipping your practice," I said firmly. "And the master says in the book over there on your desk that your practice must stay steady, without gaps." I didn't skip my practice. He replied in a voice that said that he was unaccustomed to being challenged. But I knew that I had to press the point now, or he'd never be healed. You did, I repeated. I can see it. It's as plain as day. It's the way that you can probably look into a real criminal's eyes and see that he's done something wrong or not. I mean to say, the captain cleared his throat, that I didn't skip a day. I found it necessary to not do my practice on a day. On a day, I smiled with a little pain in my heart, for I suddenly recalled Katrine saying the same words to me with the same smile. Perhaps it was more than that, he allowed. Then you must give me back my book now and let me leave, I said evenly. Your back will never be healed if you won't practice steadily. Eat a little every day, the master says himself. And the fifth of the obstacles is laziness. That's one of the sutras, 130E. And the fifth of the obstacles is laziness. And that's one of there's some obstacles of the mind in the Yoga Sutras. So what I'm going to be doing is we're going to be reading the book and seeing some of the sutras, and then we're going to cross-reference the sutra through the sutra book right here. But we're going to do that only on the Zoom room. So go and sign up for the Zoom room. Go and come on through. We're gonna start that up next week. All right. We're gonna start with the ones from this week. All right. The captain's face clouded. He snapped up straight with his usual grimace. It was not laziness, he retorted. I'm not a lazy person. It was work. Pressing work. I have responsibilities, you know. Always that, I answered coolly. Always that. Something important you had to do? He paused and seemed to think it over. And one day, I think it was, I really wasn't in the mood, you see. Stretching and bending and groaning and all that. A man my age with my responsibilities. Enough. I smiled, holding up my hand. I've heard this all before. You have? He looked at me intently. You have taught many others. I thought that I might be the first. Oh, not that I've heard these excuses from others, I laughed. It's just that I've tried to use them all. I've tried to use all of them on my own teacher. And I know what they are. They're just plain laziness. Laziness. Don't call it anything more noble. Something else comes up and the yoga takes a little effort and time, and so you skip it. You don't really want to do it. You don't really want to heal your back. You should just let me go. But I do want it. I do want to be healed. It hurts, you know. He put his hand on his back and looked down to the floor with sadness. It all hurts. I really thought you might be able to help. We stood there, quiet for a while. I looked at him standing like that, in his sadness. It came to me that perhaps he was ready for a bigger step. A step that would take him a long way. If he would really try it. Captain, sir, I believe you. I believe that you really want to be healed. That's not what he said, but I like that. That's a good response. Oh. He looked up and gazed at me gently with a kind of gratitude. And so I will tell you something now, something special. It is a little early to tell you, but if you follow it and follow it sincerely, you'll be able to practice steadily. You will not skip your practice, and it will work. He nodded. Then tell me, I will try. I nodded back. In the book, the master says, another sutra, if you wish to stop these obstacles, there is one and only one crucial practice for doing so. And what is that? He asked. And the master says, you must use compassion. The companion gazed out the window. Compassion? What's that supposed to mean? How would that stop me from skipping my practice? It's something you have to understand, I say quietly. It's something important, you see. You can't do this. You can't do yoga just to fix your own back. It's too small. We're too small. If you do something just to help others, it'll never work. You can never really put effort into a thing if it's only for yourself. It has to be for something bigger. Bigger? Like what? Look at the way a woman will work for her children. Look at the work they can do. 24 hours a day, day in, day out, for 10, 20 years. It puts your little office work to shame. And they can do it for only one reason, because they're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it for others too. The captain laughed. So you want me to do yoga for other people too? Are you telling me that I won't be able to fix my back unless I figure out how to fix a couple other backs along the way? Something like that. I said, all you really have to do is think about helping some other people with what you learned. If I taught you all this yoga and suddenly your back was better and you were walking around with a big smile on your face all the time, would it do anything? Say, for the sergeant? Or for that younger policeman? For the corporal? The captain smiled? I don't know. It would take a lot for him to do anything. He never has any energy. He gets excited. He never gets excited about anything. He eats a pile of his mother's buttered bread, flat bread, fills up on a nice pot belly and strolls to work. Then he stands at the door there and stares out at nothing all day. He paused. But could yoga do anything for him? Do you think it could give him a little pep, a little interest in his life? It does a lot of things, I replied. A lot of things you can hardly guess, but yes, certainly it would change his life. I paused. So he listened to what came next. But you see, in a way, now that he knows you started yoga, he'll wait and see if it helps you. If it obviously does, then we can get him to fix himself. And so you see, if you have compassion, if you keep thinking, if you fix your back, you might also be fixing the corporal. Then when the day comes that you feel like skipping your practice, you won't. Because you'd be hurting him, you see. A way to use compassion. I like it. The captain mulled over, but I could see the idea might not be clear enough in his heart to work. I like how that's phrased. And just then, the door to his office burst open, and there was the sergeant, panting for breath, his face red and contorted from his liquor. "Oh!" he exclaimed. "Sorry, sir. I didn't know you were, occupied." He stood there, stupidly weaving in the doorway, leering at the two of us. "That too?" said the captain to me quietly. "Same thing," I replied. He nodded. "I won't forget." And then, "Sergeant, could you help the prisoner back to her cell?" Chapter 4, A Balance of Feelings. And we'll get to that next week. So we got her arrested. So we got the start of the practice. We got the confrontation